Hello and welcome to Marketing Times of Recovery, the Built Environment Marketing Podcast. And I'm your host, Ayo Abbas from Abbas Marketing. This is the second episode of my Marketing Models mini-series, aka there are many other ways that you can get your marketing done. This episode looks at consultants and independents. It's a model I know well, as I'm one of them. And my guests today are the lovely Julia Nicholls and Dominque Staindl. As well as looking at the consultancy model and how that works, some of our key takeaways from our conversation include how clients really need to talk to their consultant to find out more about their areas of expertise, and also how they work, and whether or not how they work actually works for you. And also you need to consider, is it strategy you need? Is it strategy and implementation? Or is it just a case of tactics? You just want someone to implement all together. Working with a consultant can really bring new perspectives to your practice. Let's head over and check out the episode. Enjoy. Hi, Dom, and hi, Julia, and thanks so much for coming on this show. So, firstly, Julia, can you introduce yourself, who you are and where you come from?
I'm Julia Nicholls. I have a consultancy called the imaginatively named Julia Nicholls Communications. I'm a strategic consultant, so I work with architects to understand their business goals, their purpose and their culture before creating a set of recommendations based on how they can best reach their audiences and stand out from the crowd.
So, Dom, can you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. I'm Dominque Staindl. I'm a communications consultant, freelancer, and have been for about a year. I don't have a name, and I don't have a website, and I don't have an up-to-date LinkedIn profile. So this is new for me, and this is me really having to practice what I preach. So you're going to get me all sorted, Ayo.
But I'm sure you will have a LinkedIn profile done when this goes out, won't you, Dom?
I promise, yeah.
So anyway, firstly, I guess I want to talk about, this whole series is about showing different ways that practices and firms can actually get their marketing done. So I really, really wanted to kind of bring out some of the stories of some of the different ways that I know that people work with firms. So how do you work with a practice, Julia? What's your how does it work for you normally?
Well, I guess it's a very collaborative process. I work closely with architects. Every practice is coming with its own challenges and opportunities. So there's always a bespoke response. I work with practices for between 5 and 10 weeks. Initially running a workshop with practice directors or perhaps anyone else supporting on new business comms and marketing, and really try to get under the skin of their approach and what they're aiming for as a business. It's something that often people haven't considered for a while. They maybe when they started up, but I think it's good to do it every 3 to 4 years to really recalibrate what you're aiming for. And work out why perhaps there have been shifts in the market, or you've evolved some specialisms or some experience that you need to then consider. So we do a starter workshop where we really explore the business vision and the culture and the values of the practice. We might look at people within the practice, the figureheads. Perhaps there's an issue of succession or creating profiles for new management staff who've been promoted. We look at their clients, collaborators, competitors, peers, and all this kind of information helps me to look at where they want to be and what kind of communication style is going to resonate with them and their audiences, and understand what their overarching purpose is. And then I go away and research all of that and come back with a summary workshop to report my findings.
Wow, it's very comprehensive. No, it's a lovely model. How long did it take you to build that model, Julia? Or how did it develop? Or is it something you had in your toolkit?
I was director of PR at Squire & Partners for over 20 years. And so I guess I had an understanding of what you would need to think about to create a strategy. But working as a consultant, I've only been doing a year. So I evolved a process which I've been sort of, tinkering with over the last year, probably more adding bits on and working out what works for different practices. But essentially I've worked out that what they need from me is a real kind of strategic framework of how they can stand out, how to reach their audiences best, what tools they need to use, because they don't necessarily need to use all of them, and how to make the best use of often limited resources. so that their time is being used most efficiently and most effectively and with the most impact.
Fantastic. Thank you. So Dom, how do you kind of tend to work with your clients? How do things work on your side?
Well, this is really interesting because for the last 12 months, I've just blithely gone along, assuming that everyone else is doing the same thing as me. And of course, this is exactly why we need these kinds of podcasts, because no one's doing the same thing.
No, we're not, yeah.
Exactly. So I actually work a little differently. And I suppose that probably it's a bit of a hangover from my experience in agency life, that I work on retainers. So basically, I've had clients ongoing for the last sort of year or so. And so I continue with them. It's more of a kind of growth strategy. So I'm implementing as well as delivering strategy and, working with them quite closely. I might be recruiting, I might be structuring internally so that systems are set up so that they can actually produce communications, produce content, start to build the profiles, get an understanding of who they should be putting forward, etc. And I sort of treat that as that's just sort of a monthly retainer, and we do it on an estimate per month. And if it works out that it's happening that long, then that's great, and we make the most efficient and effective use of that time. Yeah. So completely different system to Julia, and actually much more sort of, I guess ad hoc in a way that I respond very much to industry shifts, almost at an hourly basis. And I go back to them and I sort of suggest, do you want to, respond to this in the media, or what are we doing about that? Yeah. And is that something that we can take forward? We've got a strategy at the start of the year, but of course, a million things happen between sort of January and December. So, we work on a really kind of almost hourly, half daily basis as well. I'm in touch with them sort of quite often throughout the year, and it's very much like I'm an ingrained part of their core team. So that's how I operate predominantly.
I'd like to say it was planned that you both work in completely different ways, but it wasn't.
I just thought, what a piece of genius. Well done,
obviously planned by me. I knew this. No, I didn't. But in terms of, I guess, working with a consultant or an independent stroke freelancer, which are all kind of interrelated terms, what do you see as the benefits of that, Dom?
The benefits are that actually I think I work a lot more. You sort of get to sit between someone who's embedded internally and someone who's in an agency life. So that's how I see it, because of course I've done those two other roles. So I see it as the sort of the happy medium in between. Yeah. Someone who's internal, so a communications manager, is, attending loads of internal meetings. They're sometimes bogged down in the, the daily grind and also the inevitable politics, etc. And then someone whose agency is sort of quite removed from all of that and only just sort of dipping in to the bits that matter that they can externalize really quickly. And what I'm noticing with my role and how it's worked over the last year or so is that I'm going in maybe once a week even, or with some I'm not, but, some I am. And so I get a sense of how they're operating internally, but also I maintain a sort of one step removed just so that I have my finger on the pulse in the outside world and make sure that I'm connecting the dots externally so that I can bring those opportunities back in. So I sort of see it as a really happy medium.
And how do you see that, Julia? How do you see the benefits for working kind of with you as a consultant in a kind of project immersive type of way, I guess?
So I guess for me, having a really considered strategy, having been through that in-depth process, is going to save you time, energy, and money, because you know who you're talking to, what you want to say, and why. And I think once you've got that strategy, you can then use that as a briefing for either current or incoming staff who don't necessarily have experience in communications. Yeah. So often in small practices, it's, someone will hire a studio manager, or someone in leadership will be told, you're looking after comms. They don't necessarily have that background. And I think to have a kind of working document that they can regularly refer back to and, use to kind of measure success when you're struggling to remember, why am I doing this again? Like, what's the purpose?
And the rationale, yeah.
Yeah, and like you're not just filling up an Instagram feed, you're actually doing it purposefully, with measurable results. And I think that perhaps what my process does is it's a short-term investment for a long-term gain. The strategy should be good for a few years. And I think, as Dom knows, in agency life, that kind of sort of, so let's say 3.5 to 5 grand is probably an estimate of what you would spend over the time with my process. That could be gobbled up with an agency within 2 or 3 months, but without that kind of benefit of a really thoroughly researched strategy that's particular to your business. So I think that's the overall kind of benefit, is that really deep understanding of your practice. I think as Dom works, perhaps a bit more nimbly in terms of, week by week things are changing.
Yeah.
And I think that is really useful. I do tend to keep in contact with all of my strategy clients. So sometimes we'll have just regular check-in meetings, perhaps quarterly, to review progress, look at upcoming projects or opportunities. Sometimes I'll help them to upskill in-house staff or support them to grow in-house teams. So there is a continuing relationship, but the bulk of the work happens within a couple of months.
Fantastic. And are there any kind of drawbacks of working with consultants and independents such as ourselves?
We're perfect.
Dude, I know I'm not.
You know this.
I think with any model, there is no one-stop communications solution. So, my strategy is not something that you can just hand over to me and I'm going to do it all for you. But to be honest, neither is somebody in-house, neither is an agency. The content always has to come from the people in the organization doing the work. The people on the ground being creative and innovative, and what I think they do get from this process is a manageable plan that takes into account resources and time. But the best communications will always be enabled and supported from the top, because the content needs to feel part of the business and culture. Yeah. And then when you have a meeting with somebody from your studio, you want it to feel like the voice that they've engaged with on Instagram and LinkedIn and, in media articles. So it has to come from you still. So it's not that kind of one-stop approach where you work with either of us and we just do everything for you.
Do you find that people come and ask you for that? Have you had people come and ask you, kind of go, can you just give me one of those, or not? Julia?
I think people are looking for an easy fix. They're looking for somebody to take the problem away from them. Yeah. And it's really not as simple as that. I mean, actually, I met someone recently at an event, and she said that she lets a relatively new Part 2 student take full control of their social media without any guidelines at all on content or purpose. And I was really troubled by that.
It's ballsy.
And they were talking about emojis, and I was just like, oh my gosh, that worries me.
And where are they going? Oh my gosh. So Dom, are there any drawbacks that you can see apart from giving a Part 2 to take control of your whole social media?
Well, first of all, my first piece of advice would be stop. Get a strategy together and brief them. So, I mean, I guess Julia's covered it beautifully in what she said, and I think so that you could be looking at it from either angle. You could be saying, are there any drawbacks for the client? Well, Julia's covered that, you don't get everything you need from, whichever model. You kind of need to accept that each model has its, advantages and drawbacks. I would say from a freelance perspective, there's some challenges with that, having come from internal and having come from agency, is that suddenly you're very alone, yep. And so there's that element of just going, okay, well, I need to be really proactive about being in touch with people, about staying, alert, having my finger on the pulse, and all of those channels that were such a given in previous sort of teams and agency life, or, all those water cooler conversations or whatever's happening, even just meetings, you're just absorbing so much information, and you don't have that opportunity as a sort of singular consultant. So you've just got to be really alert and aware that, you kind of have to be on that, as well as talking to your clients and doing deep thinking and then thinking strategically and high level. So you are operating at sort of many different levels, and as you're spreading yourself as thin as possible in as many places as possible as well. So that's a challenge from a singular perspective. But for clients, I think we're a brilliant happy medium. I mean, I'm just going to keep plugging that.
It's very good. You're very positive. So in terms of success stories, I'll say sex stories, that's wrong.
Go on then.
I was going to say that's wrong. I'm going to edit that out.
Damn. The podcast was going to take a turn there.
I didn't make any notes on that.
I've missed this question. Well. In terms of sex stories, God, I can't say it.
Okay, so you just want to know about our sex stories. We've got it. We've got it.
Success. The word success. Right. Okay. I can do this.
We'll let you record again.
Okay. In terms of success stories, where do you feel that how your work has worked really well? Have you got some examples, Dom?
So I guess without giving too much away, it's been really nice when there's a bit of and I'm going to go into like jargony language here, but there's a bit of a cross-pollination. And this happens in agency as well, where basically you learn about something through one avenue and you can basically hit that across all your clients, and suddenly, all the others who didn't know about it are really delighted. And then you can do the same for the people who gave you that initial opportunity. So there's a lot of that's really exciting for me, is when you can kind of draw loads of industry information from one avenue and just spread it across other clients' channels and all of that. So
I'm going cross-pollination, that's the word. It kind of keeps coming to my head, but yeah, that kind of thing, isn't it?
Yeah. Exactly. And just being able to share intel and recommend it. When you've got people, I think this is really important as well, is operating in a certain level of clientele. So making sure that, your clients are kind of the kinds of people you want to be promoting. So making sure that the information that's relevant for one is likely to be relevant for others because they care about certain values or certain delivery standards or whatever it is that you're after. So that's when it gets really exciting for me, because that means you're building a little ecosystem. That's really exciting.
Fantastic. And Julia, have you got a success story?
Please don't cut this out.
You really want to know my sex stories, are you? I can assure you they're not that interesting. Well, I mean, I completely agree with Dom in that working with lots of different clients gives you really useful content for everybody. And actually, from working in one practice for over 20 years to then working with sort of 10 in 1 year, I've learned so much. I've had so much more to kind of impart because of all of those different experiences and the way different practices work. I think, a couple of examples, again, keeping kind of client confidentiality in mind. But one studio I worked with was being sort of stretched too thin, really. They were trying to do everything. They needed to really recalibrate and ensure that they were focusing their limited time and effort on the audiences that were most important to them and, where they wanted to grow their business. So we kind of worked together. We established a voice for them that had a really distinct character. We created a timeline for communication so it didn't feel overwhelming to them. And we kind of agreed some core messages that would be a thread in their work and would connect them with the type of clients they wanted to work with. And, seeing them since, and, we have check-ins, they've said it's really transformed not just their communications, but the way they run their business, because they have a much clearer focus of where to invest their energy. And also, importantly, when to say no to things.
So
if they're not on their path, then just don't waste your time there. So that's been really nice feedback. And another one was quite an established practice that kind of had a mismatch in their internal and external perceptions. They were, really lovely people, and they were quite modest about their skills and experience and about actually a really enviable position they created in the industry. And some of the things that were really important in-house that were key drivers in their work and really, had built a really strong staff loyalty and were also valued by clients weren't visible outside the organization. Yep. So we worked hard to kind of make that part of their narrative and, share more of their culture through engaging content, and also to feel confident in doing your own communications. I mean, I was speaking recently to Celeste Bolt, another communications consultant, and we were saying actually doing your own communications is really hard, especially as like one person, because you're literally just sound like you're blowing your own trumpet. Yeah. But there's ways of doing it which are useful to people and help people with their own problems. So it's hard to take that advice on board yourself, but we have to do it, and there are ways.
Okay, so Julia, so how do you get the most out of working with a consultant? What's the best things? What would you say to someone thinking about embarking on this?
I think being invested in the process. So, we understand that you're short of time, but if you don't give the workshops or the process your full time and attention, you're not going to get the most out of it. The workshops I run are probably a few hours each. And sometimes when I say, can we strike out half a day or 2/3 of a day? I could see the directors like balking, but they're really essential in understanding your company and your goals to outline a strategy that has the right kind of impact. And secondly, I would say a client perception audit is part of my process for any practice that's over sort of 3 years, 2 or 3 years. And that's interviewing clients, also maybe collaborators, sometimes the media, about identifying what you're recognized for, the value that you bring, where you are or aren't keeping up with the competition. I'm not just asking clients to say nice things about you, although that's always good. It's also really useful information on, how you're perceived and whether your current comms are hitting the mark or not. And you can also really pick their brains about what their challenges are, what their future pipeline of work looks like. You can pick up some quotes that you can use for future content. So I think, just being really invested in the process and sort of, going for the client perception audit, because it's sometimes what you think you're known for is not actually what other people see you for.
Are people hesitant when you suggest that option?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, I think, and often they will put forward a client who they just have a really good long-running relationship with, and I might push them a bit harder then, say, well, give me one of those, but I also want one who's maybe never given you a job but has had several meetings with you, or, a collaborator that, you've worked with once on quite a tricky project that, other people will give lots of different bits of information, and it's always really valuable. It's the unexpected bits that are the most valuable.
It's definitely that. And in terms of how you work, Dom, in terms of how would people get the most out of working with the way that you work?
Well, I just want to say thank you to Julia for saying that, because there is no point in having comms if you're not going to feed into it. And the whole point of us and what we do is to enhance your business decisions. There's no point you've got to have a business plan. You've got to have an audience in mind. You've got to have sectors you want to work with, or a sort of caliber of how you want to work or where you want to work. Otherwise, we're just guessing. With some of the clients I work with, I do just guess based on, they're like, listen, just do it and we'll come to you with a business plan in a year. And I'm like, great, okay, because I can do that and that's fine. I've, sort of self-autonomous, and, the practice and studio itself is just rolling along. So it's great. But I was going to say, for me, it's work with someone you can build a relationship with, because there's so much efficiency with that. Instead of writing I was going to say us covering, but I'll say accountability covering emails. You can pick up the phone and have a really great friendly chat on a Monday morning and just bash out a few things that need clearing. And then you've got the week and you can just absolutely, hit all these things you want to get done for them. It's just, I feel like I've got a really great working relationship with my clients, and it brings me a lot of joy. It gives me a sense of purpose and a great reason to get up in the morning, because I actively want to do good things for them. And it it just gives levity to the whole experience, and it makes it fun. And I mean, I said to my parents recently when I saw them over Christmas, I'm just going to keep doing it till it's fun, until it's not fun anymore. And so that's my mantra. That's, and I think I might take that out into life. I sort of think, could spread. But yeah, just make sure that you've got that connection, because it just, especially if it's longer term, it's just so critical. And, you want to enjoy these practices, and these studio directors and managers want to enjoy their day as well. And they don't want to be telling you off or, doing any of that sort of nastier side of stuff. And you need to get to resolutions together, and you're not always going to agree. And that's actually even more fun, because then you have to work harder to get rationale and reasoning, and then stick with your convictions, or go, okay, fine, and leave it, and then move on, and then reintroduce the idea a year later when they're ready. So, it's just...
And they'll say it's their idea, Dom. You forgot that.
Exactly. And then, and then they'll probably say, yeah, what a great idea. That was my idea, wasn't it? And you go, yeah, absolutely it wasn't.
All right, I've got a question. So are businesses always ready for marketing? This is a question I actually do have in my head quite often, because sometimes I'm like, when you just said about the thing about having your business strategy in place, your goals, your growth, a lot of people don't have that. So are businesses always ready for marketing?
In theory, every business could do with marketing, but not every business will effectively use marketing.
Okay. Have you got an opinion on that one, Julia?
I think, I'm always surprised at how a lot of organisations have not really thought hard about the end goal. They're kind of looking 2 feet ahead, not, a mile ahead. And I think having that goal, so maybe it's, to increase new business inquiries because it's harder to convert them these days, so you need more of them. Perhaps it's to shift industry perceptions of your studio or gain recognition for a particular aspect of your work. I think that those kind of goals are going to give you and your communications, however you're engaged with communications, a purpose. And, like Dom said, it's fun to see how you're making steps towards those goals. Yeah. And I think that, obviously everybody needs to market. I mean, for me, if you're not marketing or communicating with a strategy, then almost sometimes it's better not to do it at all, because you're literally spending time doing something purposelessly, if that's a word.
Yeah.
It is now.
So we can make up lots of words. That's fine. We do that. That's our job.
Can I ask a question? How do we view marketing? Because I say in communications, and I see marketing as a component of that. I see so many things. I see communications as the umbrella term, and then there's like PR, social media marketing, internal comms, and brand management under that. But do you guys see it the same way?
Mine's different.
Okay.
I see it, I guess, because I'm a marketeer. I always class myself as a marketeer rather than a comms person. Or if anything, I say I'm a marketing communications person. But for me, I guess it's anything to do with clients. I class that as marketing. Okay. And that's kind of, it's quite a large kind of brush, but that's kind of how I see it. And then kind of pulling comms and lots of other stuff underneath it. But that's the other thing. There's a lot of definitions, isn't there?
I think there are. Julia? I mean, I think I probably more align with what Dominque just said in terms of, I think comms is the umbrella term. Marketing actually is something specifically to get new business in. It's like, the outcome is to get a project from it, or to start engaging with a client. But yes, I think as well, like marketing, particularly in architecture, seems to be quite a dirty word. Like, people don't want to kind of get their hands dirty and do it. And so I almost use communications. Like, I think communications is intrinsically tied to marketing. The two things should not be separate. But
you stay away from the word.
I think that communications is more welcomed because it's broader. But they're all essentially, for me, to be aimed at your target audiences, which is mostly your clients. So it's not other architects, which is obviously the classic architects speaking to architects. But it's all got to be client facing and speaking to them.
Does that mean I need to change the name of this podcast?
No. That is not what I was going for. But I was sitting in my laptop, like 20 minutes before logging on here, and I thought, what's the difference between PR and marketing? I better Google that before I jump onto this podcast.
It's so interesting, isn't it? But everyone takes a different take. And I think the other thing is that we've all got different flavors that we bring to the table anyway. Like totally. Even just talking about what you work, but also our skill sets are so different.
Yeah.
And I think in some ways, when we were talking about that question about how to choose who you're working with, it's actually understanding what you need. That's got to come into it, because what we all offer is slightly different. I like writing. There's different things that we all bring to the table. I'm into podcasting and all crazy stuff. So we all, and I also think there is that flavor as well as actually what do you need from a consultant has to be one of your questions. And what it is you need to kind of move your business forward as well.
Exactly. Could I say something? There was something I really wanted to get across, and that's a lot of clients who talk to me about potentially working together don't actually recognize what they need. So I could probably do a half an hour recce and go, I think there's some serious gaps here, here, and here. Yeah. And they're saying, oh, we need more social media. And I'm going, no, you need business development. So it's my one takeaway, if there's anyone sort of in a practice listening to this, would be to ask the consultant what they think you need, because actually they're probably going to have a much better understanding of how to address your needs as a business than you may think. You might think you need social media. It's possibly the last thing you need. What you probably need is internal structures that then lead to better business development that then you can crow about on social media. It's just, there are different ways of approaching these things, and I'd recommend always listening to your consultant.
Definitely. And I think going to the consultant with the end goal, not with what you think you need to get there, because it's our job to work out how you can get to the end goal, And I think that filling up your social media, if it's not the social media that your audiences are engaged with, is just a waste of time. Absolutely. So, I think that's where you've just got to be focused on the end goal and let us, at least listen to our recommendations, even if you don't decide to take them on.
Okay, so I guess on to the final question for this. It's kind of, what things should practices consider when looking to kind of hire a consultant? Are there 3 things that people should do, Julia? Do you want to kick off?
Well, I think I'd agree with Dom that you need to speak to a few people to find someone that you feel comfortable working closely with. It's a fairly in-depth process. There's potentially some kind of uncomfortable truths along the way. So I think, you've got to be able to work with somebody that you have a kind of rapport with. Again, I would say think hard about the end goal. So that probably is going to take you some time, outside of the sessions to really think with your fellow directors or partners about what you're actually aiming for as a business. And then I think maybe just, accept that you're going to have to be honest. This process requires you to kind of reveal your warts and all to make the best recommendations. So, you need to slightly be open to bearing your studio so that you get the most out of the process.
Opening your heavily architectural-led design door, really. So, Dom, what kind of things should people be looking at when working with a consultant, to finish off?
I think we've already touched on. I think you're buying a personality and you're buying someone's experience. So think about how you want to work with that person as well. As Julia mentioned before, if you haven't got time to invest, get someone who's super autonomous and can just run away with really good ideas, do a light touch check in and keep going. If you're a control freak, then work with someone who will sit down with you and go through every detail, meticulously. Pick something that works for your business. Your business is likely a reflection of your personality anyway. So get someone who suits that. And that is all in the interview process. And that's the whole purpose of those things. Someone might have a really great idea, but if you don't like them, you're not going to want to work with them for the next 6 weeks or year or whatever it is. So just kind of use your gut.
Use your gut. I'm going to finish on that. Thank you so much for coming on to the show, Julia and Dom. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. It was so fun. My first podcast. Woohoo.
Thanks so much for listening to the latest episode of Marketing in Times of Recovery. And I'm your host, Io Abbas. If you want to find out more about the bi-weekly show, do check out the show notes, which will give you more information about who the guests are and all the things we've covered. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, make sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on an episode. Until next time, bye.